all you have to do is search YouTube for motorcycle training, and you're going to come across a number of different personalities and different training methods when it comes to this field. And today I want to tell you about one of those, which is Robert at Be the Boss of Your Motorcycle. And the whole idea of this video is to give you 7 things that you may need to know, or things you want to expect before you go to this class, because anytime you go to a person with a specialized skill, it's not going to be cheap. It may cost you a little bit of money, but these are life-saving tips as well. And so it is very important, if you take your motorcycle skill seriously and you want to be just more comfortable and confident on your bike, I think it's important to do that. But I want to give you an idea of not only my experience, but straight from Robert himself, how he approaches these classes and things that will help you to not only maximize your time, but maximize your dollar as well if you decide to go with Robert at Be the Boss. Now, one thing that Robert will tell you, tell everybody, that comes through his courses, is that there's 100 different ways to do these things, right? And so he's not saying that his way is the only way, but it is the way that works for him, and it's clear that he knows what he's doing, and he's been able to teach a lot of people how to be the boss of their motorcycle. It's all in the name, right? Because you want to be able to control that bike like most riders actually don't do, unfortunately. So he's trying to break the mold there, and that's a part of his slogan. But today I want to tell you these 7 things that you need to expect. And of course, I appreciate Robert at Be the Boss for letting me spend some time with him and actually get inside of his head and see how he approaches these classes and how he handles each personality type that comes through there. There's a lot of cool stuff in this video, I believe. And if you like what I do here, consider subscribing. You could also join us on Patreon or join the Shot Squad right here on YouTube if you like what I do. Big thanks to you guys. Let's go and get into it. Now, the first thing I want to talk about is what you, the rider, needs to leave at home and what Robert is going to bring to you. Now, you may be thinking, well, I'm going down to him. What are you talking about? Well, the first thing you need to leave at home is going to be your ego. Now, he says to leave it on the curb, but maybe leaving it at home is better, so that way you're not tempted to pull it off of that curb and jump right back into it, which is kind of something that I did, to be quite honest with you. I'll talk about that here in a minute. But leaving your ego at the curb and understanding that mistakes are going to be made and you're going to be called out for some of those mistakes. But the other thing that Robert brings to the table is a judgment-free environment. So you're going to hear him yell, but he's trying to talk over the loudness of your motorcycle. You're going to hear him correct you when he, is doing certain things. And I think one of the best thing, and this goes for any, like I said, any specialized field, is you have to humble yourself in order to take in all of the information that you're going to receive. If you're going to block out certain things that trainer is trying to teach you, then there's no way you're going to be able to absorb the majority of those things, right? And so the whole idea is, even if you know what you're doing, you want to be able to take in a bunch of new information, section it off, inside of your brain, and use that inside of your toolkit. And so this is, for experienced and really new riders out there as well. Now, I mentioned that I should have left my ego at home instead of putting it on the curb. And while I was open to learning everything that he had to say, and anytime he corrected me, I tried to make sure that I would, do those things in real time. Sometimes I wouldn't. Sometimes I just, got really, uncomfortable. But one thing I'll say is, through the first 3 exercises, I was feeling really good about myself. The slow race, the stop and starts, even the slow turns where you're not trying to lean the motorcycle at all, left and right. I was like, dude, I'm crushing this thing. And then when trust and belief came up, started to have some issues. I told Robert that I trust him, but I don't believe in my skill yet. And then when the single serpentine and the U-turns came up, that's where I realized that my fear level of, turning the bars and also leaning the motorcycle is actually a lot higher than what I thought. Now you may say, hey, you've actually done a few training videos here on YouTube, and that is true, but everything that I've done has been very basic stuff. I've never tried to pretend like, oh man, I'm the U-turn master or anything like that. But I also feel like I have a responsibility to not only myself and my wife, who is a passenger on the back of my motorcycle, but I have a responsibility to y'all as well. It's just like what you see behind me when I do my gun channel. I take this stuff very seriously, and knowing that I have a responsibility to that community and I have a responsibility to y'all. And motorcycle training isn't something I've done a lot of, and that's why I wanted to take the opportunity, humble myself, and go out there and do this class. But again, leaving your ego at home and coming into an environment where there is no judgment, you're not going to be talked down to or anything like that, and you can share a few laughs. That's the environment I learn in the best. The thing that you really want to do when you go to this course is maximize your time. No matter if you're doing a private lesson, one of the open practice lessons, or one of the scheduled lessons that he has. And this is something that I found out the hard way. I really needed more time because I signed up for a 4-hour private lesson, and that was kind of one of those things where I was like, man, I really need more. But unfortunately, there's some things that I did that caused me to lose time with him. And so I was 30 minutes late. I'm pretty much late everywhere I go, so that's not a shock probably to anybody that actually knows me, personal flaw and all. But also, my hands started cramping up about the time we started doing our left and right hand turns, our slow turns, without actually leaning the motorcycle. And unfortunately, it's due to carpal tunnel surgery, and for some reason my hand strength has never been that great. Now in the new 24s, I have yet to find a company that is actually doing the adjustable levers. I am hoping to get one from a company here soon, kind of like a prototype, but those levers are different on the new 24s, and that's going to help me a lot. That's something I normally do anyways, is I'll put the Oberon adjustable levers on the bike, and that way they grab a little bit quicker, a little bit less pressure on my hand. But that caused me to have to sit out a couple of times, and 3 minutes here, 5 minutes here, 2 minutes here, whatever, it starts to really add up. So one thing you may want to consider is signing up for a private lesson. So on the open practice lessons, of course, he's out there practicing and he invites y'all to come out there with him, which is a pretty cool thing. And then, of course, he has his scheduled lessons, which he's going to try to keep to about, maybe 10 people or so, and you're going to get some one-on-one there. It's going to be a little bit less than your private lessons, but you are going to get one-on-one. He's still going to take time with you, which I think is pretty freaking awesome, and you're going to be able to go through all of those exercises. And then, of course, the private lessons, they're going to be a little bit more, but man, was it super beneficial, just me and my buddy having that one-on-one with him. And I'll tell you, it kind of led to one of the next things I'm going to talk about here in a minute, but definitely maximizing your time. So if you know that you're somebody that, can learn really good in a group, and you know that the additional pressure actually helps you, hey, go for it. But if you're somebody that, you're kind of timid around other people, maybe, whatever the case may be, you know that, you need that one-on-one and constant attention, the private lessons would be the way to go. Another thing you should know is that this class is not only for Harley and Indian riders. All kinds of motorcycles can come through this course. Now, one thing you will want to keep in mind is that a lighter motorcycle is one that can actually make you think you're doing things correctly, because if you're not really concerned with that weight, then there's nothing to keep you from actually, using your throttle or using your clutch and providing sufficient power to the rear wheel at the times when you really need it. Meaning, you can correct mistakes on a lighter motorcycle way easier than you can, an 800-pound bike. And I guess I say all that to tell you that if you know the basics and you've kind of mastered, a lighter motorcycle and you have a heavier bike, it may be more beneficial to bring that heavier bike, and then that way those insufficiencies and those areas you're lacking can be pointed out. Because we have our own lens that we look through. And if we know, hey, we're doing these U-turns and, we've never judged ourselves inside of cones, we've never practiced any of that, we just know, hey, yeah, I know how to turn my bike around or whatever, and you don't have another set of eyes looking on you, you may think that you're totally fine and that you've built the skills that are necessary in order to evade some of the stuff out on the road, when in reality, maybe you haven't. So having those other eyes on you, pointing those things out are going to be beneficial to you. And I know sometimes, like with me, man, I want to do really good through all of the exercises first time through, but that's just not practical. So again, that kind of goes back to humbling yourself, leaving your ego at the curb, and willing to learn as much information as you can. And it's also super rewarding. While it can be frustrating in the moment, it's super rewarding afterwards, or once you start to really get a feel for how these things are done and done the right way, then you're going to start to realize that weight on the motorcycle actually doesn't mean anything when it comes to slow speed riding, once you're able to get that out of your head, of course. All of this takes time, but that is something that you will learn in this class as well. The clutch, the throttle, the brake. Again, we use these on our motorcycles every single day, but how effectively do you use them when it comes to slow speed? Are you doing it the correct way? These are all things you can expect to learn, which is going to lead to another unintended consequence, or maybe intended consequence. Your confidence level is going to go way up. Motorcycle riding is a really weird thing because anybody can go through an MSF course. Anybody can buy a big bagger, and anybody can go in a straight line. You know, when you start to learn things that you had no clue about before, when you start to make better stops, when you start to realize that, man, I was never really, using the clutch in a proper way, or I was never using my rear brake before, but now I am, and now my bike is more stable at slow speeds. When you're keeping the throttle loaded, and you're keeping those RPMs up, and you're messing with the clutch a little bit more, and you're kind of working inside of the friction zone instead of all the way out and all the way back in. When you're making those stops and you're coming to a stop and you're kind of keeping the throttle loaded, and you're in the friction zone, it's going to feel different. It's going to feel very weird to you, but once you get a hang of it, man, it really starts to open up a bunch of confidence inside of you. And that's a big thing for me, man. I wanted to feel more confident. When I come across a wrong turn or something, I don't want to have to take a lap around the block just for a simple U-turn. I want to be able to make that U-turn and keep on going about my day. If you got somebody barreling up behind you and it's clear that they're not going to stop, if you've never turned your handlebars and started to go from a stop like that, how do you know that you could even get out of the way? So these are all, little things that you'll start to pick up on, and it kind of bleeds into the next thing we're going to talk about, which is expect to look at other riders in a little bit different light. Now, again, that doesn't mean that you're going to walk around and say, man, hey, I noticed you were dragging your feet along. You really kind of suck at riding that thing. You need to take a course, But you will look at them. You will kind of pay attention to how other riders conduct themselves, and you will see duck walking, you'll see feet dragging, and I mean, it is almost insane how much of this you will start to see. And it's just so apparent when you look at other people like that and how they're riding and how they're controlling that motorcycle. I think it's pretty telling when you have somebody that's going slow speed, both feet are up on the floorboards, and they're in complete control of that bike. They're kind of going back and forth, no feet on the ground whatsoever. And then you have somebody else that are full feet out, and they're just clutches kind of all the way out, and then it comes all the way back in, and then they come to a stop and the front forks dip down. It is really obvious who has taken the training and who hasn't, and you'll start to look at other riders and how they conduct themselves on their motorcycles, and you might even look at them in a little bit different light and kind of point that stuff out, because again, you don't know what you don't know, and if you've never learned this stuff, why would you ever pay attention to it? And, the other thing about that too is there's so many riders. I think the norm, kind of going back to what I said before, where anybody can just buy a motorcycle, right? Anybody can go in a straight line. And the norm is to not know how to do a U-turn within 24 feet. not to stop your bike smoothly, not to lean your motorcycle and actually know how to go slow and turn those handlebars, which is something I have a ton of work to do on. But again, you can really tell who has the issues with that stuff and who has taken this stuff serious, because that is one of the biggest reasons that you want to go, because you want to be as good as you can, the best you can on that bike, and show that thing who's boss, because there's a lot of people that just ride their bikes, and that bike will kind of dictate whether they're safe or not the other way around. Another crucial piece of advice I can give you is, before you even go to the class, make sure you know the terminology. Watch a few of his videos, especially in the beginning, and know, what preload and keep it loaded is, knowing sufficient power to the rear wheel, knowing, to use your rear brake, knowing the first 5 steps especially, so that way that stuff doesn't have to be explained to you, because again, that's going to cut into that time, and that your time's just going to fly by. So you want to make sure that you maximize that experience, know the terminology, and just watch some of his videos. It's absolutely free to do that, and you're going to gain some knowledge. Now, that knowledge that you learn through a computer or a phone screen is not necessarily going to translate to the range. You'll find that out as well. But if you have the knowledge and you kind of know what he's talking about, and he doesn't have to explain all of that stuff to you, it's really going to help you in the long run. So that way you don't have to go through all that. You can kind of say, yeah, I know the first 5 steps, and boom, keep it moving. And that's another thing too. You really want to know your bike, know where that friction zone is, and really understand some of those basic mechanics, and that's going to help you out a long way. And the last thing that I want to talk about is, don't expect this to be a one and done type of deal. So what I mean by that is, you go through the class, you're feeling really confident and everything is great, and then you start to realize, man, I haven't practiced in 3 or 4 weeks. You go out to the range and you're like, dude, what happened to everything I just learned? This is absolutely a perishable skill. And so it is something that has to be repeated over and over. But fortunately, it's not like you have to spend, 4, 5, 6 hours a week practicing this stuff. It takes very little once you know the exercises and how to set them up and the order in which they are done. That is crucial. That's something that Robert really wanted me to convey, is that the order in which he does them is not just haphazard. He put those things like that because that's what makes most sense to maximize your time, even on your own, when you go to practice. And just dedicating a little bit of time to it, man, is crucial. And like I said, that's a piece of advice that I am now taking more serious as well, because I've practiced a few times here and there, but again, it's not to the extent like I did out there. And now I know I don't want to lose where I'm at. I want to gain upon that. So I know I have a lot of work to do myself. So it won't be the end of the road, but it will definitely be a good starting point for you. Even if you've been riding for a long time and you don't know any of this stuff, it's really going to help to kind of correct some of those instincts and mistakes and learn mistakes that you've had over your riding career. So that's it, man. There's 7 things that you should expect from Robert at Be the Boss of Your Motorcycle, and I really hope this will help you out. I hope that it will help to maximize your time and your money when you make this investment, because you're investing into yourself when you do this, and I think it is definitely worth the money when you go to see him, man. Really freaking awesome experience. So there you go. I'd love to hear from you guys that have taken a course from him, or any courses that you've taken. What are some important lessons that you've taken away from those? Maybe I'll do a part 2 to this video talking about motorcycle training. Love to hear from you guys. And again, if you like what I do, consider subscribing. Drop me a like on the video, and if you really want to support me, you can join the Shot Squad. It's not a lot of money, but it really helps out, and you get some pretty cool perks along the way. Big thanks to you guys. See you in the next one, and as always, hold them down.